Welcome back to VADA Live. I'm your host, Dan Kerrigan. Joining us today is Brian Crossin, who's an instructor at NADA Academy. Brian brings more than 2 decades of fixed ops and parts management experience and now works with dealers across the country to sharpen performance in the parts department. Brian, thanks for taking time to join us here on VADA Live.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Worth noting to kick off our discussion, and our Don Hall often reminds us that despite our name, the Virginia Automobile Dealers Association represents more than just the dealer, every person across every team in the operation. So great to be chatting parts with you today, Brian, and no point really burying the lead of what people are talking about right now as it relates to parts and the ongoing tariffs, trade tensions with China. What should dealers understand about maybe potential impacts? What's your take there?
We get a lot of questions on this, Dan, and it's really pretty simple for us in the parts world. We get cost increases and decreases every single month, manufacturers process price updates, and we always have to be conscious of the changing conditions in the market that affect our costs. So our systems are really set up and designed to take those really without too much thought or effort. So just another month in the parts department when costs are changing for us.
I'm sure that'll resonate with a lot of folks watching this episode, and it's a helpful reminder as well. Bumping out a little bit, so from your experience, what's the most common blind spot dealers have when it comes to parts performance?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I don't know if blind spot is the right word for me on this one, but really it's just not looking at the parts department like a sales department. We have all sorts of measurements and KPIs for selling new and pre-owned vehicles. And if we just looked at our parts department with the kind of the same lens, we'd see it's not just putting parts on shelves and handing them out when technicians ask for them, but there's a really big sales potential with our parts department, not just to sell parts, but to sell service appointments, to get customers who need really expensive parts into pre-owned or new vehicles, the things that we would expect all the other departments to do. Not really holding parts to that same standard, I think, is a maybe a blind spot or a mistake.
Parts department, misunderstood, reading about that a little bit in the same sentence. That can be the case for some dealers. Why do you think it continues to be one of those departments where misunderstanding could be part of the equation? What do you think is perhaps a disconnect there?
It's not flashy. Parts is very logical. When you do A and B in parts, C happens almost 9 times out of 10. So it's not as exciting as putting car deals together and the front of the house activities, but it really has the potential to help the other departments or hurt the other departments when it's not managed well. So I think one of the biggest misunderstandings is just that it's easy and it almost runs on autopilot. So we don't really give it a lot of attention because, it's just parts doing what parts does back there. And there's a lot that moves behind the scenes to have a well-run and effective parts department that's really going to support the other departments.
What can folks in the parts department do to be heard, to really elevate in the dealership?
That is a great question. I wish I had the answer to that one as well. Wow. It's doing the basics. I know that's not, it's not a sexy answer, but mastering the mundane in parts is really what makes a parts department stand out and be seen. So from the simple things as handling customer concerns, TOing, or turning calls or customers over to the service and sales department. When you start turning parts phone calls into service appointments, parts phone calls into pre-owned vehicle sales or extended service contracts and F&I, parts is going to start getting some attention. But I think it all starts with the basics, just delivering that exceptional customer experience. When we think parts, the first thing most people think is parts hold. The stereotypical answer of a phone call. But really, it does have the impact of a customer-facing department. Your parts department can answer 50 to 100 phone calls per person per day. So just making sure they're taking care of the customer, that's always number one. But also taking care of the other departments by helping customers find their way into service or into sales for all the other offerings that we have.
And at NADA Academy, speaking of calls, I understand there's actually an exercise involving mystery calls to parts departments. What do those calls reveal about experience gaps, and what do leaders as part of NADA Academy take away from that exercise?
They don't go well, Dan. I don't think you're surprised to hear that.
And that does
And
not shock me, actually. Yeah.
it's, it's a sales call, really is what it is. But no one has ever trained the parts department that it is a sales call, or even how to handle a sales call. So, it's like someone gave everyone that works in the parts department this book of how to answer the phone. Because across the country, really across North America, every parts department when we mystery shop answers the call the exact same way. I can almost predict the next words out of their mouths when it comes to price, availability, ability to overcome objections. So there's a significant area of opportunity, and it's not just parts, it's across all departments. But it's the old adage, you have to inspect what you expect. And there's not a lot of mystery shopping going on in the parts department. There's also not a lot of sales training specifically designed for parts, which can be an obstacle for some people because they just don't know what a good parts phone call sounds like. So that's one of the main takeaways from those mystery shops is, let's include parts in our sales training so they know how to gather customer information, build rapport, follow up. I mean, have you ever heard of a parts department following up with a customer who didn't buy a part?
No.
It's almost never happened. But you would never for a second let that go in sales. Who didn't follow up with this customer in sales? They don't work there anymore. But you have 100+ phone calls every single day that come into your parts department, and I'll throw in service too, that no one ever follows up. That's kind of scary.
Wow. Mentioning NADA Academy, and to your point about parts being very important, overall operation, thinking about some of the sales elements that parts couldn't help with contribute to Parts Week. Is that a whole week at NADA Academy? It's almost speaking to, I guess, the importance in trying to really teach this.
Yeah, so our academy program goes through all of dealership operations. So we do week-long modules, parts being one of those modules. But you don't have to come through the full academy to experience it. We offer the Parts Week. You can sit in with an academy class, or we offer it throughout the country. My partner and I, who facilitate Fixed Operations One Parts, we try to bring the education to where the dealers are. So once a quarter, we bring that education. We try to hit East Coast, West Coast, and Central. So anyone who needs to attend can attend. I like to say I'm a pretty good spokesperson for this because I took the Fixed Operation One Parts class I have to look at the calendar, 24 years ago. And it was a really great foundation for my career. And I know you're wondering, Dan, I was 9 when I took the class, if you were trying to do the math there.
We have an editorial call. We don't ask ages. I appreciate you clarifying, Brian. No, that makes sense to me. I'm glad you.
Yeah, it's like a Doogie Howser kind of situation.
And that's amazing. Your background too, Brian. While we're asking about that, we mentioned decades in the business. What was your path to NADA Academy, which started, of course, at a very young age? We've established that.
Yeah, I like to think luck had a little bit to do with it. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I'm one of the few Northern Virginia natives. I've lived here my entire life. And NADA Academy is just 15 minutes away from my house and my dealership, my first dealership growing up. So I was just fortunate enough that my dealer principal was a believer in NADA and education, and he took a chance on sending someone who had only been in the business for a year and a half to take that Parts Week at the Academy. So, proximity had a lot to do with it. I think a little bit of luck and just a dealer that believed in me and believed in education. And I will also note what I think is kind of interesting, Dan, is the proximity for Virginia dealers. We don't get. You would think Virginia would be the #1 registrants in our classes, and we don't have a ton of our students come from Virginia. We do have a fair number, but not as much as you would expect with our headquarters being so close.
Where and why should dealerships prioritize education then?
You don't know what you don't know. And parts department, I think, is the classic example of that. Think of any other situation where you would give someone close to $500,000 of your cash to generate a return on investment with that. Who would you be comfortable giving $500,000 to? I would hope you wouldn't give it to anybody who hadn't been educated on finances, how to invest and generate a return. And with our parts departments, that's that's the reality. Is we're giving $250,000, $500,000 to someone who has had less hours in most cases of formal training. They've just learned on the job. So I don't think there's a better reason education could be more important. It's your cash. It's usually the second largest cash investment a dealer has in the parts department. I'd want to make sure it was in the hands of someone very capable.
An ADA Academy, and speaking about the importance of education, which is something President and CEO Don Hall talks about and prioritizes, and he had shared in his August leadership message a really interesting quote from a fellow instructor, just talking about the parts department as perhaps the most neglected, underappreciated, misunderstood department in a dealership. And there's opportunity there to prioritize it. I want to make sure we're pulling that misunderstanding theme through. Brian, what is your take there?
Yeah, that's my co-instructor Mark, and we joke that we have a support group for parts managers. We meet on Wednesday nights, and we talk about all the the terrible things that happen to parts people in the dealership. But yeah, it's again just an overlooked department. I don't have a great analogy for this, but I think it's kind of like that friend with a truck who you only really start hanging out with when you're getting ready to move. Right, that's the parts department. We don't think about them until we need them, right? That part's on back order. We can't deliver a new car. There's a stop sale. We're getting ready to have a buyback maybe in the service department. We've got to get these parts in and out. Other than that, it's just kind of like, yeah, they just do their thing back there. So what I encourage dealers to do is, again, it's your cash. Go back to your parts department, and it's your profitability of your store. And where really it's not, you don't need to be a parts expert. I think one of the best things we do at the Academy is we leverage what you already know and apply it to the different departments. So if you're from a variable background, we're going to use analogies for variable that fit and land and fixed. And most people think they don't understand or know a lot about parts. It's just sales. So when you look at it through that lens, all the things that make you successful in the sales department really translate to parts. You get a customer's new vehicle in that you ordered. How often are you going to call them to make sure they come pick up their new vehicle? Right? You get a part that's on the special order shelf. You call them one time and think, they'll come in and get it. Right? Well, maybe we should call them a few more times. Right? It's not rocket science. It's just very logical. So don't be afraid to get back there. It's not. I know it's dark. There's not a lot of windows in the parts department, but it's not a scary place. It's very logical, and common sense, unfortunately, is not common practice, but it really, really works and applies in the parts department.
Where can tech play a role? Sales side, marketing, where all the acronyms, CRM, SEO, AEO, AI playing a role in the sales marketing side. Can that trickle down to parts? Should parts be the center of that? Where can tech play a role?
I think it will see a huge change in the next 5 or 10 years, but again, typically that tech's going to go to the flashier departments first, right? Variable operations. We've already seen a lot of that with AI, digital retailing, chat tools, so on and so forth. Parts is really ripe for disruption because we still do a lot of our processes manually. Oh, wow. So the first thing I know, again, this isn't going to sound sexy, but it's just logical. The first thing I tell dealers to do with technology is just make sure you're getting what you pay for. So the first thing we pay a lot of money for is our DMS. Make sure your parts people are using the DMS the way it was designed to be used. Number one, they're trained on the DMS and are using it efficiently. Number two, you're using all of the DMS capabilities that you're paying for. Because we still have, to this day, parts departments, and I'm not knocking it if it works, but we still have parts departments that are handwriting special order tickets, handwriting service advisor, special order notifications, you name it, we're doing manual processes, and it's 2026, right? So use your DMS, the tech that you already have, and then for the future, inventory, stocking parts on the shelves is really just statistics and probability. What's the probability we're going to need this part? What's the statistics of having it on the shelf, investing in that part so we have it when a customer needs it at the right time? And AI and machine learning are probably better than that than any human being. Now, not going to replace the parts manager, it's just going to change the job focus. Instead of spending a good portion of their day on inventory management, they'll actually be able to spend more of their day on sales management. So managing their sales force, right? Following up on unsold leads, just like we would in the sales department. Prospecting for new customers and wholesale, all sorts of the things that we probably don't do a great job right now because we're too busy managing inventory. So I think there's a huge future for that that'll help parts managers just be more efficient, help dealers with their investments to streamline how much money they have invested in parts to not have things they need that they don't on the shelf for too long.
A question about metrics, Brian, just to put a finer point on that, and 2 parts. What's the base case dealers should be tracking when it comes to metrics? What would that best case be? Any additional ones on top of that for those who really want to up their game?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been really pushing for the last year and a half or so is what I'm going to call investment quality. So making sure you have your cash invested in quality inventory. Now, most people, when they think parts, the first term that comes to mind when they think of inventory is obsolescence. We want to make sure we don't have any old parts. We don't want to have any junk collecting dust laying around. Yes, that is very important. But also I want to make sure that you have your dollars invested in good quality parts on the shelf. So again, not to get too technical, but parts that you sell, reorder, stocking parts. We also have other categories of parts that aren't old, but they still aren't good. It's like a special or new car that you ordered for somebody that was toothpaste blue, and then they decided not to pick it up, right? We have a lot of parts like that as well, where someone ordered it and they decide not to pick it up. So it's not old yet, but we still can't wait 11 months or 12 months before we do something about it. Just like that new car that hit your lot, you wouldn't wait a year before you found a buyer for it. You'd start working on it every day. So our parts department has all these different categories of inventory. So I want to make sure dealers have their money invested in quality parts. So investment quality, I would say, is number one. And again, that's a utilization of your DMS. All those reports exist in there. Number two is just why you have a parts department, and that's the tried and true first time fill rate. You have a parts department to have parts when your technicians and customers need them. So there's a metric for that. It's called first time fill rate. It's what it sounds like. It's having the parts on the shelf when people need them. Because you invest on average dealers, again, $250,000 in parts. You do that to have parts on the shelf, not to order them. Anybody can order parts. So first time fill rate keeps our technicians busy working in their stalls. First time fill rates keeps your customers happy because they don't have to leave their vehicles. They get in and out efficiently. It opens up your service schedule. It reduces your loaner car expense, lot damage, you name it. It's kind of the most important metric in the parts department, and a lot of parts people, a lot of parts managers, dealers, operators don't track it. And again, one of the reasons they don't is they don't use the DMS the way it's designed, so it's not been an accurate metric for them.
Speaking of anybody ordering parts, consumer shopping online, how does that factor in with digital parts presence, perhaps an e-commerce strategy? What's the take there?
When I came through the academy, it was 2002, and the instructor at the time, who's since retired, he said, anything that you do physically in your dealership, you need to be doing online. So I took that to heart. And when that technology was available, I think it was 2004, I opened up my first e-commerce parts store at the dealership that I was working in. And when I came to teach here at the academy, I asked my co-instructor, I said, what are we teaching now? And so I started back in 2017. I was like, what is the new frontier of the parts department? We have to be teaching new and exciting material. And he looked at me and he laughed. He said, Brian, we're teaching people the same stuff. And I was like, no, we're not. And he said, yeah, Brian. I was like, e-commerce, people aren't selling parts online? He said, no, they're not doing it. And, I'd say about 15-20% of the students that we see coming through the academy are actively selling parts online. So I believe it is a really big opportunity. I know it's not for everybody, every brand, every manufacturer, every dealership, but it is an opportunity to meet our customers where they are. Because we can say if we don't sell parts online, customers can't buy them online, but they can. They just can't buy them from us. So I'm a big believer in e-commerce. I've had very successful stores in the past with e-commerce, and we encourage, again, like anything else, and dealership operations, look into it. There is a demand for customers. We also mystery shop e-commerce sites, and you can imagine the results don't go well there as the same as our phone calls. So again, it's a great opportunity to make your parts department more of a profit center and really sell outside of your area of responsibility. You don't just have to sell parts online to your local client base, but we have dealers selling millions of dollars of parts nationwide and also worldwide. So again, just another opportunity to add an additional revenue stream to your dealership, and the opportunity for a lot of dealers there.
What was it like to do that in 2002 of all years, where you had the internet at one point? Perhaps there's some major motion pictures that a lot of folks had interest in parts. All of a sudden, time, place, opportunity of all places that and times to have that learning experience. It seemed unique.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was, kind of, like I said, a little odd for me at the time being so young and in the business. But really, I think the best part of that was I didn't know any better. And, why not try? Because, I had everything to risk. I didn't have a house, didn't have a new car at the time. So why not take a risk? And, what's the worst that could happen? We didn't sell anything and we lost a couple $100 because it was very affordable at the time as well. But yeah, it was just something new, exciting, and also really great time to be in it because I didn't have much competition at all. It was, I think, maybe me and another brand dealership a few states away that were the only competition at the time. So it was just me and them going at it on eBay and Amazon and our individual websites.
And as maybe one or two final questions, Brian, we love to leverage experts and ask about them as consumers. What do you look for in a parts experience when you're going in for repairs? What's the bar for you from a consumer, knowing all you know from the expert side of things?
I am your biggest nightmare as a customer. No. I tell dealerships all this time, and just places in general. I mean, if something bad's going to happen, you want it to happen to me because I'm not going to get mad. I'm not going to get upset about it. I just want you to learn from it. There's no failure in mistakes if we learn from them. So my biggest expectation and just a huge passion of mine is customer experience. So, whenever we can eliminate the friction points that customers have to deal with, that's what I want in my experience, whether it's a fast food restaurant, a fine dining experience, or taking my vehicle into the dealership. I want to be greeted warmly. I want to be shown direction and navigation. Where do I go when I leave my vehicle? What's the next step? I don't want you to point where the customer waiting lounge is. I want you to take me over there and have a conversation and get to know me while we're doing that. Introduce me to the amenities of your facilities and your dealership, all the reasons why I shop there in the first place or should continue to shop there. And, I'm probably just a little old fashioned, but I just love that customer experience. And, I think the dealers that are going to win 2026 and moving on, it's mastering the mundane. It's mastering the basics of customer experience and remembering the people aspect of this business. One of my biggest hot buttons when I do mystery shops is making the customer work. So customer will call into the dealership for service, say, how much are brakes? And they'll say, oh, let me transfer you to parts. You can find out how much the brakes are. They'll transfer you back to service and we'll tell you how much the labor is. Like, don't make the customer work. You get all that information with the customer. You can call them back if you need to, but we need to make this easy for the customer. So anytime we can reduce those friction points, the anxiety of just bringing your car somewhere new or uncomfortable. I worked in dealerships my whole career, so going into a dealership is nothing new for me. I know you drive over the hose and the door rolls up and you drive in. Most of our customers, there's a lot of cars moving around. Some of them are moving around at a good pace. They don't know where to go. Let's make this an easy, friendly customer experience, just like you would at any of the fanciest hotels, fine dining restaurants. That's really what separates the best dealers for me, is that quality customer experience. That's what I'm looking for.
And Brian, education, whether I'm starting out in the business or I have decades of experience, why do you think it's important to prioritize that for all?
It's everything. If you're not learning, that's one of the best things about the car business is you never stop learning, because as soon as you know everything, whether it's all the new car models and trim levels or all the parts and accessories, we get new ones. So you never stop learning, and I don't believe we should ever stop learning. Right? There's always something new to learn, even if it's just remastering the basics, a refresher course, remembering or relearning the things that we forgot that made us successful in the past. So we're big believers, obviously, in education at the Academy. It's such a big part of growing your people, but also, growing them in their career and personally. It's often said, and my other colleague, who a lot of people know, Bob Atwood, is famous for saying, education or training is never an expense. It's an investment in the future profitability of that department or the dealership. And we really believe it's one of the best investments that pays over and over again, because no one can take it from you. Once you have that education, it's yours. So we're big believers in it.
And Brian, I feel like I need to clarify. I mentioned a major video or major motion picture earlier in this conversation.
Yeah,
it was Fast and the Furious. I don't know why I was trying not to name drop that, but 2002, the internet, that movie came out a year or two before. It just seemed like parts were happening at that moment. So for anyone, it would be the original. I think they're up to like 20 now. It's a worldwide franchise. But a point of clarification from the host as we close out our discussion. Brian,
sorry, I missed the reference. That was a great setup.
No, it was. I'm glad we could talk about it, and no missed references. Wanted to make sure everyone was aware if there were questions. We try to not have any of those at the end of the session. Clean interview through and through. Brian, I really appreciate you for joining us on VADA Live. You have been hearing from Brian Crossin, an instructor with NADA Academy. We were talking practical insight dealers can use throughout the parts department, and we hope you found it beneficial. We thank you for watching VADA Live. I'm your host, Dan Kerrigan, and we'll see you next time.